Welcome and thank you for tuning into today's session of In Conversation With. My name is Nolizo Mhlaba and I'm very excited to engage in a conversation that speaks to some issues that many parents have raised in the past. In the last issue of our newsletter, we talked about career trajectories and how one of the most important things is for parents or adults to be able to have conversations with the young people in their lives about their passions and their interests. And so it seems fitting for us to focus today on how to have those conversations. And I'm so delighted to welcome today's guest because this is someone who is a professional in the field, a professional in the field of coaching. And yeah, so I think we're going to have a really invigorating conversation and also learn some tips for how we can do better in the coaching conversations that we have with the young people in our lives. So Akunna Onwu, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence and honoring us with your time and your knowledge. I think to start us off, maybe please tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Hi, Noli, and thank you very much for inviting me. Very excited to be here and share with you some of my knowledge, expertise, and experience in this field. As you mentioned, my name is Akunna Onwu. I am a certified integral coach. I've been doing this work since about 2016, and I'm very passionate about it. I'm also an admitted advocate, and I have a vlog. So I'm a typical millennial. I think Marie Forleo named us multi-passionate. So I have my fingers in a lot of pies, and I love most of my pies. But one that is dear to me is my work as a coach.
Great. Thank you so much, Akunna. So what is coaching? I think it's a word that we hear thrown around a lot, often in the same breath as mentoring and that sort of thing, but perhaps you could start us off by defining your understanding of coaching.
Okay, so the first thing I usually tell any client who approaches me is to dispel the conception of what coaching is, which is usually someone who gives you advice. And so the first thing I tell them, and I stress, and it was the cardinal rule when I was studying coaching, was we do not give advice. So as a coach, my job is not to give you advice.
Okay.
What I am there to do is to, and I used to say this a lot, is to help you help yourself. And it's really about helping you learn as opposed to teaching you things. And so the kind of coaching I do is called integral coaching. And so it really helps my clients arrive at a deep insight about themselves, which can then help them lead to lasting and meaningful development. And so the thing about giving advice, which we steer clear away from, is that if, for example, I tell you do ABC, and if ABC doesn't fill, you always come back to me and say, well, Akunna, I tried ABC, you told me to do ABC, and ABC didn't work. That's not my job. My job as a coach is to help you build the competency and the capability to know that you have the awareness enough to be able to do it for yourself.
Yeah.
So I like to use an analogy of, I have two arms, for example, and my right arm is my dominant one. And so at the gym, I would usually tend to lift up a dumbbell by using my right arm, but I sometimes forget that I have my left arm and it can actually pick up that dumbbell. So the job of a coach, one, help you widen your lens so that your structure of interpretation or the way you see things gives you an ability to see beyond what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So my job will be, as a coach, would say, well, you have a left arm. How about you try picking that dumbbell up? It's to first help you recognize that you have the left arm, and then to help you get to a point where you use that left arm equally as well as you would use your right arm.
Yeah.
So that's what really coaching is about, right? It's you have the answers to your own problems, and sometimes what you need is for somebody to ask the right questions for you to unlock the answers for yourself. Whereas mentoring, in my experience with mentoring, it's more of in a professional capacity, has been, for example, at work, if I look at somebody who has attained certain things that I'm aspiring towards, and perhaps asking them how they, embarked on that journey and what were their experiences, and them guiding me along and teaching me what to do, and maybe I should do X or do Y. That's how I see mentoring as opposed to coaching, because coaching is for a specific period of time to build a particular competency to do what it is that you want to do. Yeah.
I really like the analogy that you shared about, picking up a dumbbell and going from an over reliance on the dominant arm to actually seeing or realizing that, oh wait, I have this other asset that I can bring in and use to help me attain this goal that I have. And it's great to think about the idea that a coach is someone who's there to help you recognize what you already have at your disposal and actually apply it, rather than say, here are the answers, do XYZ, and you should get to this outcome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so based on that, or maybe building on that, what would you say are the traits of a good coach?
Good question. I think one of the first things that I would say definitely as a good coach is you actually have to deeply care about people, because you're working with people. I understand that there's a business aspect to coaching as well. But for me, I think there has to be a sense of wanting to actually bring out the best in others. So it's like you're kind of like a builder or a miner. You're mining out something within somebody for them to become more than they could ever possibly imagine. So there's a deep care for people, which I think is innate in great coaches.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is your ability to listen, to understand. And I think the ability to listen is a skill set that many people take for granted.
Yeah.
One can listen for the sake of listening because you want to perhaps give your own opinion afterwards or rebut.
Right.
Listen to understand requires a level of empathy. And I think as great coaches, it's an important element that you yourself harness. And that leads me to my third, trait, which would be, excuse me, being very self-aware. A great coach is self-aware. In your sessions with your clients, at least for me, what I do is I come back and I reflect on the work that I've done. During that session, was I present? What was my ego at play here? Was I feeling great about myself because we had a great session? It's all about self-awareness as well. So because you're not there to just give solutions or advice or wanting to be relied upon. You're also there to improve as a human being. So when you're connecting with other humans as well, there has to be an element of self-awareness that is at play.
Right.
So I would say the three main traits for me would be a deep care for people, the ability to listen, understand, because that brings about empathy, and also an element of self-awareness as a coach.
Okay, great. And so these are obviously, in your experience, coaching happens in a professional setting where the clients may or may not be people that you have an existing relationship with. And so I wonder if, in your view, is it possible for parents to have coaching conversations with their children?
That's a great question, actually, because I remember when I in school, when I was studying to become a coach, one of the things they used to say to us was stay away from coaching friends and family. Because there's sometimes that blurred line. But what I do think with parents, however, there's an opportunity to have coaching conversations, which is very different from, you coming to me as a client and saying, I want to be coached on X, Y, and Z. I do believe that coaching conversations, the opportunities for those arise in many situations, whether it's a parent and a child relationship, whether it's an employee and an employer. I think it's being able to recognize when that opportunity arises and how to navigate it.
Right.
But yes, definitely, you can have coaching conversations as a parent with your child, because remember, you're not teaching, you're there to enable learning for the child.
Yeah.
And so that way they don't become dependent on, mom says do X, Y, and Z. Rather, it's a case of, okay, listening and understanding where this child is coming from and what they're trying to say to you. So that ability and those opportunities are definitely there within the parent-child relationship.
Great. And I think when I think back of the traits that you mentioned of a good coach, those are definitely traits that can be embodied by parents in those conversations. So okay, I see how that works. And so you work with a much older demographic than the demographic or the audience that the Anzisha Prize works with. So our primary our primary target population, I would say, is young African entrepreneurs who tend to be in the high school, early university age, and our audience are primarily parents or adult figures in the lives of such young people. And so, in thinking about how they could have coaching conversations with young people, much younger than you perhaps are used to working with, what are some strategies you think they could use in those coaching conversations?
That's a good question. So, if I just think of this, well, it's a methodology or strategy that we use in integral coaching, and I suppose it can be applied in this scenario. It's a three-pronged approach, right? So the first one is coaching for understanding. And so when we talk about coaching for understanding, or having that coaching conversation with a parent with a child, it means meeting that child where they are. And that means you're listening deeply to understand, not to give an opinion of whatever situation is. It's literally to understand what this child is saying, where they're coming from, what made them, get to the point where they are. And usually during that conversation, steer away from asking questions that start with why. Because when you ask them, why makes me, at least if you ask me why, the first response is usually a defensive one.
Right.
And so when you're coaching, when you're having a coaching for understanding conversation, it's really about, okay, how did you come about this? What led you to this position? Getting a deep sense of understanding and bringing empathy into play during that conversation with the child.
Yeah.
Right. And to understand what their purpose is, the meaning behind it. It's really just a sense of understanding. So that's the first one. The second one is around coaching for possibility. So when you're coaching for possibility, you're thinking of the future.
Yes.
So if a child says, this is where I am, so you meet the child where they are, you ask them, okay, so how do you see yourself, or what do you see for yourself? And when you ask a child that question, it literally brings about an array of, dreams, aspirations, opportunities, all sorts. So you've literally let the child take charge of that, of how they see themselves, of what they see themselves. How they see themselves and what they see for themselves. And so that's what that coaching for possibility really looks at. It's future oriented. It's giving the child the ability to think beyond where they are and what they want to be. Right. And then the last one is really the coaching for action. So it says, this is where I am. Yeah. Coaching for understanding. These are the possibilities I see, coaching for possibility, my future oriented vision. And then these are the actions that I will take. So remember, you've now put the responsibility and the accountability in the child's hand to say, these are the things that I look for. These are the things that I dream of having. What are the actions that I'm going to take in order for me to get there? Yeah. And that for me is really giving the child ownership and accountability, which is what you want. And the child learns through that. Absolutely. As opposed to saying, mom and dad said I must do X, Y, and Z. Right. It's really putting the ball in the child's court to say, well, these are the things that I think I want, or these are the things that I want. And these are the steps that I'm going to take to get them. And that way, I mean, you can also, as a parent, your job there is to really ask the questions, the right questions and the manner in which you ask those questions. Yeah. That's what your job is there to do, not to necessarily, and I'm not a parent, so I can't necessarily speak from experience, but coaching conversations, this is really what it's about. It's coaching for understanding, coaching for possibility, and then coaching for action. Yeah. And that action is very important because the accountability lies with the child, the ownership lies with the child. And then they take responsibility for actually taking the right steps to get to where they want to be. Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant strategy, and one that is easily actionable, right? Because not only are you trying to understand someone's thinking or what has led them to their way of thinking, but you're also opening it up to the future and what could come. And I think this would be so helpful for parents, especially reflecting on the series, the newsletter series, as we've developed it so far, which is really just thinking about the future of work or what comes after secondary school or university. And just really thinking about how, as a parent, even though there's so much uncertainty, there are things that you can do to help to empower not only yourself but your child as they think about what's to come, and what they can do to reach their goals. So thank you so much for sharing such a layered, three-pronged approach, as you said. So yeah. No, I think so,
and
definitely.
I think your kids are, these are kids who have, they're not necessarily going the normal, I'm going to put normal in inverted commas, routes that, kids will expect kids to do, go to high school, then it's university. I mean, some might go, but they're thinking beyond that, thinking of a business and an opportunity. So I think as parents, that also brings with it a different sense or way of thinking that allows for that space to organically happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. And so do you have any, final insights or pieces of advice that you would like to share share with the listeners?
Okay. I'd like to say to parents in particular, I mean, you're not going to get it right the first time, but I think with everything, with practice, you get better at it. You get better at recognizing the opportunities when they're in front of you to see yourself having a coaching conversation. So I would say practice that. Listen deeply to your kids. I think, there's that old saying from an African home that used to be, kids are meant to be seen and not heard. I think we need to get away with that statement. So as parents, if your child is saying something to you, listen, and listen with empathy, listen with understanding, listen fully. So not just to what they're saying, but how they're behaving, their body language. There's a lot of elements that goes to listening. So I think that's the one thing I would encourage parents to do with their children, is to really, really learn to listen. I mean, because you are their number one support and advocate, really, before the world comes into play and starts, telling them that they can't do this or they can, So you're literally their first buffer.
Yeah.
So if they're able to lean on you and lean on you for that support system and structure, then you're setting them up for greater things to handle when the world throws them at other things that are not so nice. So yeah, that's what I would say to parents. And then also as parents yourselves, if you feel that you want to get more involved with understanding what coaching is, and you feel that you yourself might need some help in that department, get a coach. And there are coaches that do that really focus on this sort of working with parents and not just from that element, but you as a person as well. So I would always encourage people to not leave coaching as a tool when you have a problem, but engage with it in terms of investing in yourself and seeing it as a form of development, personal development. So and also in your children as well. They can also get coaches. And Anzisha is doing great work with coaching them anyway, from a business perspective as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Akunna, thank you so much for really sharing actionable items with us. I think there's really a lot of food for thought that you've presented in this conversation, but also I think speaking for myself, I feel challenged, but also encouraged to think about how I have conversations, how I listen with empathy and listen to, deeply understand, and also ask the right questions, because that's not an easy thing to do. So I really like what you said towards the end there about practicing, right? And not being fearful of getting it wrong. I think, it's definitely a process, and one that we can get better at the more we do. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us.
You're most welcome, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I hope I helped.
Yes, definitely. And to our listeners, thank you as always, and we look forward to you tuning in the next episode.